everybody, and welcome to No Strings Just Candor, Season 1, Episode 9, which is a huge deal. And I know that last week we couldn't just because there's a lot of things going on. This is full disclosure, the second time that I'm recording this because the first time that I recorded this, there was absolutely no audio, which looked a little bit like this. So, as you saw, there was no audio, and I was just talking to myself for a very, very long time. Either way, if you are new here, welcome to No Strings Just Candor. My name is Odette Garcia. I am the host, and I started this podcast to talk a little bit about everything. I talk a little bit about HR, which is my career. We talk about mental health, supporting one another, and controversial topics from time to time. So if you are new here, welcome, and I hope that you subscribe. I hope that you do become a fan because I really do speak from my soul, and I really do want to reach those out there who are meant to find me. For those of you coming back, welcome back. Thank you so much for always coming back to me, and thank you so much for your support. Now, I did not move. Everybody would be like, hey, is that what's up with your background? You change your background all the time. This time, my background is a little bit different because I'm not home. I'm actually in Texas because I had a little bit of an offsite with one of the communities I am a part of. And I decided that I was not going to skip this week's episode. They also need to understand that I travel and I do other things. So here I am, and we are going to dive in. And it's funny because the first recording, I felt great afterwards. And I said, well, let's go out and let's go get lunch. My podcast is recorded. Everything's great. And I came back, and my best friend calls me, and she's the one who edits my videos. And she says, well, I'm sorry to tell you this, but there's absolutely zero audio in your episode. And that was very hard to hear. So we were having dinner downstairs, and I quickly grabbed a coffee and I came back upstairs to make sure that I have something to release on Thursday. So what we're going to be talking about today is tough conversations. A little bit of a tough conversation, kind of like the one that Amanda probably had to have before she called me and say, how do I tell Odette that her 30-minute or so podcast has absolutely no audio? And then I ended up finding out that it was my mic, and my mic had turned off and it didn't have any batteries, and it's just great things all around. So I imagine she did a mental prep before calling me and telling me the bad news. So we are going to talk about just tough conversations, whether it be in the corporate world or your professional life, or even with friends and family. Tough conversations are never fun, and knowing that you're supposed to have tough conversations is even less fun. So if you do see me looking down on my phone, it is because I finally got my flashcards, but I left them at home. So I asked my aunt to please take pictures of them. So you are going to have to bear with me. I am going to go a little bit back and forth, but I'm going to kind of dive in and really start talking on why it is that we're even talking about this today. So I'm a little late on reading Dear Lead from Brene Brown, and everybody has always raved about it. It's an older book, but I read it and it actually changed my perspective in a lot of things. I'm already an empathy-driven leader, but I felt that this book kind of pushed me a little bit more towards it. And there's a quote that she says, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And it just reminded me of so many moments in my life where instead of someone waiting to tell me bad news or somebody waiting to have tough conversations with me, I wish they would have had them in the moment. I want to set the tone, and I want to tell you tough conversations are unavoidable. The more you avoid them, the more they may gain momentum, the more that it piles on, depending on what context you're looking at it or what part of your life. If you're looking at it from a professional standpoint, maybe you're saying, as a team leader, Hey, this person keeps making a mistake. I'm going to avoid having this conversation with this person because I'm scared of conflict. I'm scared of being able to tell them, hey, you're messing up. You're not really doing what you're supposed to be doing. And at the end of the day, having these tough conversations brings growth. It brings growth on not only your end, but their end because they're able to fix the issue right away. There are ways to navigate tough conversations. And I'm really hoping that today's episode is going to help you moving forward. We're going to talk about tips. We're going to talk about examples. I'm going to tell you stories, maybe not too long stories, but I'm going to tell you stories and examples, and you're going to kind of navigate this with me and be able to better understand the impact that tough conversations not only has on the person that is receiving, but the person that is actually having those as well. So I do want to start with talking about why it matters. So if you're looking at this and you're an executive or just general and you're saying, why does it matter? Tough conversations suck. It's because for executives, when you're leading a team, it means having those tough conversations 90% of the time. When you're a leader, when you're an executive, you're always saying, maybe it's not a good idea. Maybe somebody's not performing the right way. Maybe somebody's just not a good fit for your team. Maybe somebody deserves a demotion. Maybe somebody is not showing up right. There's so many instances where executives and leaders are having these tough conversations, and time after time, when I come in as a consultant or a change agent or an organizational development consultant, I see that a lot of these mistakes and a lot of these gaps could have been avoided by having these conversations earlier on. It's important to know that tough conversations don't only happen in the boardroom. They don't only happen at work. They happen between friends. Sometimes you want to tell a friend that they may have hurt your feelings or that maybe that's a boundary they crossed, but this specific friend isn't good at feedback. So you start avoiding it, and this friend doesn't know what they're doing wrong. So they keep doing it, and then it just kind of becomes into a whole tension thing, and it's not fun for anyone. You might lose a friendship over it. So it's not only tough conversations in the professional workspace, but it's also important to learn how to navigate these in our personal lives as well. The big takeaway here is just mastering tough conversations is crucial for growth. It's crucial for growth for you. It's crucial for growth for the other person because you're giving them feedback. So it's important to really take that dive in. Think of it as a very cold pool. I hate cold pools, but sometimes you jump in. And after you're there for a little bit, you get warmer. One of my favorite things to tell my executive coaches and my mentees, we have to learn how to be comfortable in the uncomfortable. Not everything is comfortable. And sometimes the necessary things won't be comfortable either. So we have to work a little bit every single day to learn how to be a little bit more comfortable in things that are not necessarily in our comfort zone. And I feel that's where growth really happens. So I did want to start off with myths around tough conversations because whenever I talk to my clients and I'm trying to train them through the tough conversations, I hear a lot of these buts. And the buts, I call them the myths. And I obviously don't go into a lot of them, but these are the top 3 that usually come up, which is the first one is having hard conversations doesn't always mean punishment or disciplinary. When people think of tough conversations, they're always saying, well, I'm going to teach them something and I'm going to tell them that they were wrong and I'm going to tell them that this is how they should do it. It doesn't have to be that way. Tough conversations can sometimes mean in a personal life, like a breakup. If you know that you're not meant for one another, if you know that really is the end of your path, that's a tough conversation. And it's not disciplinary. It's not a punishment. It's just being able to have conversations like this. In a workspace, sometimes it's saying, hey, maybe don't forget to turn off the lights when you leave because our office light bill keeps going up. It's not disciplinary. It's not a punishment. It's just a reminder. But for some people, that might be a hard conversation, which kind of leads me to my second myth. My second myth is that everybody thinks every conversation is going to have the same definition. A tough conversation for me is going to be different of a tough conversation from one of my teams. When I've led my teams I thought of saying, oh my God, this is going to be such a tough conversation for them. And I freaked out and I would go around and I would try to beat around the bush and then I would tell them and I would lose sleep over it. And then when I would tell them, they would just be like, okay, cool, I'll fix it. And to me, it's like, is this not really hard for you to hear? And then they were just, no, like, thank you for telling me. So, and it's happened vice versa. I had a supervisor one time that was very candid with me, and they come up to me and they're going to give me feedback, and they seemed very nervous, very, very shifty. And I remember being like, okay, well, what's wrong? What's going on? And they said, well, I've lost sleep over this. I'm so sorry that I have to tell you this, but I have to give you this feedback and it's really uncomfortable for me. I know this is really tough. And for me on the receiving end, it was a simple fix. It was a simple fix that was simply a blind spot for me. And I didn't realize just how simple it was. And I didn't, and I didn't realize that I was doing it in the first place. But it wasn't a tough conversation for me. Now, for my supervisor, to them, this was the toughest conversation they had all day. So always remember, tough conversations don't always mean the same thing for everybody. So when you're going to have them, really sit down and think, who's this conversation going to be tough for? Is it going to be me? Is it going to be them? Is it going to be for the both of us? And then from there on, you're going to prepare. And the third and final myth is conversations don't have to be an argument. Every single time I coach somebody on it and navigate it, they say, well, I'm conflict avoidant, or I don't want to argue. I don't want to get into an argument. I don't want to get into a fight. And I always tell them, well, you don't have to. Tough conversations don't have to. There should be boundaries. Just because you're having a tough conversation, it doesn't give you the right to be disrespectful or cross any boundaries. And two, it doesn't give them permission to just sit there and take it either. So boundaries are incredibly important, but it doesn't have to be an argument. It could be a simple conversation where you are being vulnerable, where you are saying, this is going to be tough for me. I don't know if it's going to be tough for you, but here it is. So one of the things that I can think of is when I had to tell one of my team members that they weren't meeting their quota. Now, this team member was notoriously known for being combative and a contrarian and all of the above, but I got along with them. I thought they were a great team member, and that team member was probably extremely strong, but they just had a different personality. The night before I said, oh my, it's going to be a fight, it's going to be an argument, I'm going to give this feedback, and I don't know how to do it. So I sat down and I wrote down what I knew about my team and what I knew about this person that I was about to give feedback to. I knew the approach that they didn't necessarily enjoy. And I kind of wrote it down and I prepared and I read it over and I even practiced. And the next day I had the conversation and their response was, thank you for telling me now. I didn't realize it. And again, it kind of touches back on all of the other points that I made in the myths is it doesn't have to be a punishment. It does not have to be disciplinary. And maybe it's not a tough conversation for them, but it was for me. So always keep that in mind. Now, when it comes to tips, I have tips for my leaders and my executives. The tips for my leaders and my executives, and it's pretty similar to just in general tips, but I'm going to talk to my executives. My first tip would kind of be like, don't waste time beating around the bush. I cannot tell you as an HR person how disheartening and heartbreaking it is for me to hear an employee who is getting terminated simply say, why couldn't you just tell me this earlier? If you're a leader and you keep avoiding the issue, and this issue could have been resolved so early on, and this is someone who has a good work ethic, and this was a good team player, and tell them in the moment, and they can fix it. Teach them, develop them, show them different ways, have the tough conversations earlier on, because I promise you, you are going to remember me. You're going to have a moment where they're going to look back at you and say, why couldn't you just tell me this earlier? So my advice is just don't beat around the bush. Don't wait around for the problem to get bigger, and just dive into the tough conversations and have them. They will thank you rather than hate you for it later on. And again, it's not rainbows and butterflies. It's not always going to be a perfect science, but there is going to be a lot of good that comes out of it more times than not. My other advice is practice. No one tells you that you have to do it in the moment. I'm not telling you, yes, I am telling you to act on it fast, but I'm not telling you to do it in the moment. I'm not telling you to immediately say, hey, you're doing this wrong and call them out in front of everybody and do all of this. I'm not asking you to do that. I am 100% for practicing. Reach out to your HR department, reach out to your leaders, reach out to whoever it is that you feel comfortable with your coaches, with your mentors, and tell them, I'm about to have this really tough conversation. I don't know how to have it. This is the dynamics that I have with this individual. This is who I think this individual is. And you practice and you get ready for it. You prepare for it. So prepare and practice. It does not have to be at the moment. I'm just asking, don't let it fester for months to come. And my last one is remember you're speaking to a human. Remember you're speaking to a human with feelings. Remember that you are speaking to a human that has their own battles. Remember that there is a human on the other side of it. So humans don't like blame. And when we're having these tough conversations, a lot of times we tend to go the blame route. We tend to go the it's your fault because you did this and you did that. And it kind of leads into kind of like another one of my tips, which is it's not about the person, it's about the issue. So focus on the issue at hand rather than the person at hand. Instead of blaming and shaming and leading with fear. For example, let's say you have an employee who's always late and is continuously keeping you behind on deadlines. Instead of saying, you're continuously keeping us behind on deadlines, I can't believe you did this, and you're blaming them and shaming them. Instead, say, hey, I've noticed that we've been behind on deadlines before. It's because we haven't really heard from you. Is there a reason why you haven't been on time? We've noticed that you haven't been on time recently. Is there something that I can do? Is there something we can do? What is the issue at hand so we can kind of get over this obstacle and we can not only meet our deadlines, but that we can assist you if there is a way that we can assist you. So always remember that it's two or three or four, whoever is involved in the problem versus the issue, not against one another. So always make sure that you're remembering there's a human. And on that note, the last one is like, don't bring feelings into it. If I am the HR person and I'm mediating these tough conversations, and one of them starts with, I feel that you should, and I feel that you made me, and I feel, as much as you may think that that helps, it doesn't, because then it becomes a more personal thing. And remember, I'm talking to executives and leaders here. It becomes more of a thing. So bring the facts. Bring things that you can actually make it into a concrete. I know that HR is notoriously known for make sure you document it, make sure you write it down, but it's for a reason. It's not because we're annoying. It's not because you want to be on your ass. I mean, some of us maybe, but it's not because we want to be on your ass. It's because generally it really does help you in these moments where you're saying, I'm going to give this feedback. It's going to be very hard. But when you have the data and you have the receipts and you have all of it put together, we can remove the feeling behind it. And therefore, we don't have the person feeling like you're just blaming them. You're saying, these are the issues at hand. Here are the facts. How can we get over this hurdle? How can we support you? How can we be a resource for you? Or what is going on here and how do we move forward? And what is the solution? So, tips for executives and leaders. Remember that there's a human on the other side, but also remember you're human, and be kind to yourselves, and always remember that it's okay to take a second to prepare for these tough conversations that are going to take such a toll on you. Now, my tips for general, every day, when we're talking about family, friends, all of these conversations, they're going to sound very similar, but let's take a different approach. So, for example, choose the right time and place. I don't know who my brunchers are out there, but I love brunch. But let's say you really are having an issue with a friend, and this friend keeps crossing boundaries and you're just not feeling comfortable and you're feeling that your friendship is getting worse instead of better, and you really want to bring this up to the friend. Brunch is not the place. When we're all drinking and we're all having fun and emotions are getting the best of us, because we all know that when we brunch, we tell everybody that we love them, they're the best friends that we've had. This is not the time and place. Make sure that you're finding time and place. And kind of branching onto that, make sure that they know they're walking into a tough conversation. One of my biggest things is when somebody gets caught out of left field, they are going to react as such. And when they react as such, then things get heated. So if you are going to have a tough conversation about whatever it is, make sure that you're picking the right time and make sure that you're picking the right place. Make sure that you're letting them know, hey, I really want to talk to you about something. This is really hard for me to talk to you about, but I really want to talk to you about something. Can we meet for coffee? Or can you meet me somewhere? You pick the time and the place. So make sure that you're doing that. Don't do it at the heat of the moment because most times it's probably not going to end up well. Going back to my original executive tip is it's the people versus the issue. Not the people versus the people, it's the people versus the issue. And I know that many of you have probably heard it in many couples therapies and families therapies, but it's true. A lot of times I find when I'm mediating a problem, I find that this the solution is talking about the solution, not talking about, but, oh, you remember the time that you did this, and that's why X, Y, and Z happened. And then it becomes blaming. Then it kind of goes into my other tips. Don't blame. We want to take the blame out of it, right? We want to be able to say, I want to blame you. I don't want to shame you, but I want to tell you that this is right now an obstacle, and I want to work with you to find a solution. And sometimes the solution isn't ideal. Sometimes the solution is either walking away. The solution maybe is not being friends anymore. The solutions can be in so many different ways, but make sure that it's the people that are involved is versus the issue, not versus each other. And set boundaries. Boundaries are incredibly helpful. Having a tough conversation does not give you a free pass to be an asshole. If at any point anybody crosses any boundaries, any moral boundaries, you are free to stop and say, I'm sorry, this is getting to be a lot. This is a lot of information for me to take in. I did not notice I was doing this. This is actually hurting my feelings. So give me a second. Can we please connect tomorrow? Can I have a call with you later? But make sure that you are setting those boundaries because they are essential for them to have an effective, tough conversation. And make sure that it's solution oriented. Don't talk just to talk. Don't talk just to fight. Don't talk to just get on each other's nerves and tell people what they did wrong. Talk to make sure that you're finding a solution. If you really want a solution, what is it? How can we get there together? And how can we agree that this is what we want the outcome to be? Now, when it comes to general tips, my general tips are just for executives, leaders, personal, family, sons, daughters, dads, moms, whatever it is. Acknowledge perspectives. Sometimes people have blind spots. I know I have blind spots. And sometimes I don't necessarily have the perspectives that other have. An example could be, again, let's take the employee who's always late. I go in and I say, well, you're messing up and you're not meeting your deadlines. This is messed up. You're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're an awful employee. And out of nowhere, this employee is saying, well, I'm late, but you haven't given me a chance to talk to you. I've been trying to reach out to you. You've been busy. I know we're on a tight deadline and I haven't reached out to you, but I'm having this issue. You don't understand the perspective of where they're coming from. You don't understand the reason why you're having this issue. So understand that there are different perspectives. So try to always have that knowledge and say, this person might have a different perspective on this topic. This person might have a different perspective on this issue. So I always ask and I say, what is your perspective? And when I'm mediating an employee conversation or even a family conversation, and a lot of times they're saying the same exact thing, just in different ways. So I feel like they're arguing about something that they shouldn't even be arguing about. It leads me to own your part. Take accountability. If there is an issue, you also are playing a part into this issue. You're also playing a part into this conflict. So own your part. And honestly, and maybe if you don't know your part or you're saying this and I don't have a part in this, ask them. Ask them and say, was there something that I did? Is there something that I missed? Is there something that I miscommunicated? Is there something that I maybe said that made you react this way? Is there something that, something that happened Own your part, because 9 times out of 10, you are going to have a part in the issue that's at play. And if you're right now listening to this and you're saying, no, I don't, I always say this, but check yourself. Because if there is an issue, several people contributed to it, not only one. Okay. And I'm not going to repeat myself, but discuss solutions. Make sure you're doing solution based. Make sure you're asking each other, where do we want the endpoint to be? My other general tip is don't listen to respond, listen to actually listen. It's actually one of my biggest pet peeves. Don't listen to me just because you're ready to respond. And I know this is huge for us ADHDers, because in my mind, when people are talking to me, I've already came up with 5 different outcomes of the story that you're telling me. But try to listen, try to stay in the moment, try to understand their perspective, try to understand where they're coming from. And once you do that, you're able to kind of have a better understanding about what's going on. Now, if you're listening to just to respond and you're listening to just defend yourself, I'm sorry to tell you, the conversation is most likely going to get nowhere. You're just going to end up arguing. It's going to end up getting heated, and you're going to go around and around and around. And finally, is just ask clarifying questions. If you feel they're attacking you, or you feel that they're saying that something is not right, or any of the things, ask. My favorite thing to ask is say more. Tell me more about that. I didn't realize that. Can you tell me more? Can you give me an example? What could I have done instead? How could I have supported you instead? Ask clarifying questions. Don't run away from clarifying questions, and don't assume. I feel like that should have been one of my tips. Don't assume. Don't assume, because when you assume, everybody knows the phrase, I forgot it right now, but everybody knows which one I'm talking about. And when you assume, it just does nobody good. So ask clarifying questions and see, maybe you have a bigger conversation than what you were planning on. I did come up with 3 pillars of tough conversations. And these 3 pillars are what you're supposed to lean on in order to have these effective conversations. So 1 is empathy, clarity, and calmness. Make sure you stay calm. Make sure you're staying subjective, objective. It's one of those, but make sure that you are staying neutral. Make sure that you're trying to understand, and make sure that you are knowing that there needs to be a solution at the end of this. Clarity. Make sure that you understand what is happening. Make sure that they understand what's happening, and make sure that there is clarity on all ends, that there are 2 parties to the issue, and that there is no blame or no shame. And empathy. Just remembering that you have a human on the other side, and remembering that you are human. So things happen. It's not all happiness. Sometimes shit goes south, and that's okay. Sometimes you're going to have tough conversations that are going to genuinely be tough, and you're going to come out of there and you're going to say, Odette's a damn liar. How could she? I did everything she told me to do. It is still bad. But also be realistic and say, I am human and they're human. The world is not scripted. So be kind to yourself. And that's where the empathy kind of comes into. Dive in, go for it. Don't wait around. Sometimes people will look at you and say, thank you for telling me now, and not when the thing gets worse. So go for it, head on, practice. That doesn't mean do it at the moment, but do it head on. Practice, prepare, do what you need to do, but have the conversation. Don't put it off more than it needs to. And I do want to end up with kind of challenging you. I want to challenge you to go out there and have the tough conversations, and maybe apply some of the things that I said. And when you do apply some of the things that I said, tell me how they went. I would love to hear it. I will love to hear, hey, Odette, I did everything you said verbatim. It sucked, did not work. Or I want to hear, I did some of it worked, some of it didn't. I coach my clients on this. I have mediated tons of employee conversations and even family conversations. And this is from my experience. It's not bulletproof. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect science. So I want to hear from you, and I want to hear you about a time that you had a tough conversation. And if you are right now listening to me and you're putting off a tough conversation, listen to this, take it, process it, and go ahead. Once again, thank you so much, all of you, for your support. Thank you so much for bearing with all of my technical issues and sometimes postponing my episodes. And Next episode is going to be episode number 10. I would have never even imagined getting to episode number 10 and having no idea how the people on the other side are receiving it. So for episode number 10, I am putting a link in the description in my YouTube below. You could use your name, you could do it anonymous, but I want to hear from you. I want to hear questions that you may have. It could be career wise, it could be HR wise, it could be if you want to know anything about me. So I would try to answer every single question. But for episode 10, I want to focus on you. I want to focus on the people that have supported me thus far. I want to hear what you want to hear from me, more of, less of, whatever it is. I just want to hear from you. So thank you for sticking around twice for this topic. Otherwise, I can't say thank you enough. And you all are amazing. And if you ever see me in person, say hi, come up to me and talk to me. I normally have RBF, but I promise you that I cherish any moment from any new person or existing person that is willing to support each other, uplift one another, and just be a general sense of kindness. So, yeah. So I really, truly have nothing else to say. I will see you next week. Remember to drop your questions below. I'm done here. Goodbye.